The night was thick with tension as I stood there trying to hold it together. My heart raced in my chest, and I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. "It's your fault I relapsed," my brother spat, his words sharp as a knife. I could feel the anger radiating off him, a fury I hadn't seen in years. His bloodshot eyes locked onto mine, filled with accusations I couldn't quite understand. How did we get here? I had spent so many sleepless nights trying to help him, cheering him on through rehab, encouraging him to stay strong. And now, here he was, blaming me for everything. I had given up so much for him, sacrificed so much of myself, and all he had for me was rage. His voice trembled, the last bit of control slipping away. I didn't know if it was the alcohol, the stress, or the pressure finally breaking him, but it didn't matter. I had never seen him like this, so broken, so angry, and so full of shame. The storm in his eyes felt like a mirror reflecting every ounce of guilt I had buried deep inside. Maybe I had pushed too hard, maybe I had expected too much, but it didn't feel fair, not now, not after everything we'd been through together. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, to remind him of the better days we'd shared. But he wasn't that person anymore. He was someone else, someone who blamed me for everything. And in that moment, I didn't know who he was anymore, or who I had become in the process. I had always been there for him, since the very first moment I knew he was struggling. When he entered rehab, I swore to myself that I wouldn't let him fall. I visited him every week, encouraged him when he wanted to give up, and celebrated every small victory. It felt like a second chance for both of us. He was my brother, and I believed in him more than anyone else. But now, I wasn't so sure anymore. The trust we had built over those long months of sobriety had been shattered in a single, angry outburst. I wanted to understand what had happened. Where had I gone wrong? I had given everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. I kept asking myself, was it my fault? Did I push him too hard, expecting him to be something he wasn't ready to be? Or had I simply been too blind to see the cracks forming beneath the surface? As I stood there, unable to move, my heart broke for the brother I had once known. The one who laughed with me late into the night, the one who shared dreams of a future free from addiction. What happened to that guy? I couldn't recognize him anymore. His relapse wasn't like the others. I had been through this cycle too many times to be fooled by empty promises. But this time, it felt different. It felt like we were on the brink of something new, something real. The signs were there, the quiet mornings, the deep talks, his calm demeanor. We both knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had faith. Then, without warning, it all fell apart. It wasn't a slow slip, not like before. It was as if he had been hiding it all along, the poison he had been pouring into himself for days. When I found the stash of liquor, I didn't know whether to scream or to break down in tears. I tried to confront him. I begged him, but the shame in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. His mask had slipped, and the person I thought I knew was gone. He was back in the grip of his addiction, and this time there wasn't a way out, at least not one he was willing to take. I felt helpless. I couldn't fix it this time. My brother was slipping away, and all I could do was watch. That was the moment I realized I had been fooling myself. I had been holding on to hope, thinking that this time would be different. I didn't want to accept that he might not be ready. But he wasn't. His relapse wasn't just an accident. It was a choice, a conscious decision to give in to the darkness that had always lurked in the corners of his mind. My heart shattered as I sat next to him, trying to offer comfort, but he pulled away. He was in so much pain, yet he pushed me out. I tried everything to make him see reason, to make him remember what it felt like to be sober, to feel hope again. But he couldn't hear me. His eyes, once so full of promise, were now dull, clouded with regret and shame. I couldn't save him, not this time. I was running on empty, and no amount of love or encouragement could fill me back up. I didn't know where I stood anymore. Was I his protector, or had I just become his prison? The phone call came at 2 a.m. I was already awake, unable to sleep, my mind racing with what had happened. The rehab center was calling again. He hadn't shown up. I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. I knew it was coming. They said they tried calling him, but his phone was off. They asked if I had heard from him, if I knew where he was. My heart sank. I couldn't believe it. He had promised me, promised himself, that he was done with that life. But here we were, just one more broken promise in a long line of disappointments. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my keys, started the car, and drove through the empty streets. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I had to see for myself. He couldn't hide from me anymore. He couldn't disappear again. I was done with the guessing, the waiting. This time I was going to confront him, and I wasn't going to let him lie to me anymore. The weight of the past few weeks had started to sink in. I had been giving everything to him, my time, my energy, my hope. It felt like the universe had put a cruel test in front of me. How much could I give before I had nothing left for myself? At first, it was manageable. His recovery had given me hope, made me believe that we could both have a fresh start. But the longer I tried to help him, the more it felt like I was drowning. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, without wondering if he was okay, if he was still sober. It became an obsession, a fear that consumed me. But this fear wasn't just about him, it was about me too. I was losing myself in his fight, and I had started to forget about my own life. My job, my friends, my passions, all of it faded into the background as I made my brother's recovery the center of my world. The phone calls, the texts, the constant checking in, it was all I could do. I tried to stay strong, tried to tell myself that I was doing this because I loved him, but somewhere deep inside, I realized I was losing pieces of myself. I wasn't the same person I was before, and I wasn't sure who I was becoming. It was a slow unraveling, one I couldn't stop, no matter how hard I tried. I had reached the point where every call felt like a reminder of the life I used to live. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, my heart racing with both fear and hope. Would it be him? Would it be someone from the rehab center calling to let me know he was slipping again? It wasn't healthy, this constant state of anxiety. But how could I stop? How could I not care? Every part of me was tethered to his recovery, to his future. And yet every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. I was no longer just his sister. I had become his caretaker, his emotional anchor. My entire identity was wrapped up in his recovery. And somewhere along the way, I had forgotten about myself. When I tried to talk to my friends, they'd listen, but it was clear they didn't understand. They didn't know what it was like to live this way, to give up everything you are for someone who may or may not want to change. I started questioning everything, my role in his life, my role in my own life. Had I made the right choices? Was I helping him, or was I enabling him to stay trapped in this cycle? And the hardest part, I had no answers. The fear of the unknown gnawed at me, even as I continued down this path of uncertainty. It wasn't until I heard his voice again that I realized how much I had been holding on to. For months I had hoped, prayed that things would get better. I never stopped believing that he could find his way back. But when he finally called, it wasn't what I expected. His voice was steady, but there was something off. There was no desperation, no panic, just a calm resignation. "I'm fine," he said, but his words felt hollow. It was as if he had convinced himself that he was okay, even when everything around him was falling apart. I didn't know how to respond. All I wanted was to hear that he was fighting for himself, that he hadn't given up. But his words didn't match his tone, and the silence between us felt suffocating. I had spent so much time trying to help him, trying to fix things. But here he was telling me everything was fine, even though I knew it wasn't. That moment crushed me in ways I couldn't even begin to describe. It was the first time I realized I couldn't fix him. I couldn't save him from himself. He had to want it, and he didn't. He wasn't ready. That was when the cracks began to show. His relapse wasn't just a slip-up, it was a choice he had made. A choice to let go of everything I had worked so hard to build with him. It wasn't just about the alcohol anymore. It was about his refusal to change, his unwillingness to fight. I had done everything I could. I had been there for him when no one else was. I had stood by him through the darkest of times, and now he was pulling away, distancing himself from me. He had already given up. It didn't matter how much I cared, how many times I told him I loved him. He wasn't ready to accept help. He wasn't ready to face the truth about himself, and the hardest part was that I couldn't make him. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was fighting a battle he wasn't even in. I was trying to save someone who wasn't willing to save himself, and it was slowly tearing me apart. I felt like I was drowning in his pain, his guilt, his shame, and I couldn't breathe. No matter how much I loved him, it wasn't enough to pull him out of the darkness. It was hard to accept that I had no control over his journey. I had spent so long thinking that if I just tried harder, if I just loved him more, he would change. But love wasn't enough to fix him. It wasn't enough to pull him out of the dark place he had been living in for so long. I had spent so much time worrying about him that I had stopped worrying about myself. The phone calls, the late nights, the endless worrying, it had all taken a toll on me, and I didn't know how to stop. I was burnt out. My friends, my colleagues, they could all see it. They kept asking if I was okay, but I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't okay. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. The person I had been before all of this seemed so far away. I couldn't remember the last time I had done something for myself, or felt anything other than exhaustion. I knew that if I didn't start focusing on my own healing, I would lose myself completely. But how could I? How could I walk away when he needed me the most? The guilt weighed heavily on me, a constant presence making it impossible to see a way forward. The tension between us was suffocating. I had tried so hard to ignore the signs, but the cracks in his recovery were growing wider by the day. I had seen it all before. The subtle changes in his behavior, the excuses, the sudden disappearances. But I didn't want to face it. I wanted to believe that the work we had done together was enough, that the time and effort I had invested in his recovery could somehow change everything. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the alcohol anymore. His moods were unpredictable, his demeanor cold and distant. The brother I once knew was fading away, and I could feel the space between us growing every day. It was a lonely place to be, stuck between caring for someone who wasn't willing to fight and the overwhelming pressure of trying to protect myself. I had to confront him, had to face the truth, even if it meant accepting that all my efforts might have been in vain. The hardest part was that I didn't know if he even cared enough to try. The fear that he might never come back from this was haunting me, but I couldn't keep ignoring it. The truth was there, hidden beneath every moment of silence, and every time he turned his back on me. When I confronted him, it wasn't the catharsis I had hoped for. Instead, his eyes filled with anger, and his voice rose with each word he spoke. "Why don't you just let me go?" he yelled, as though my love was a burden. My heart shattered in that moment. I had spent years being there for him, fighting for him when no one else would, and now he was telling me to leave him alone. I wanted to scream back, to ask him why he couldn't see that I was trying to help, that I had never given up on him. But something in his eyes made me stop. I could see the shame, the crushing weight of his own failure, and I realized he was too far gone to see my love as anything but another pressure. His words cut deeper than anything he had ever said to me. It wasn't just about the addiction anymore, it was about the way he saw me, the way he resented my attempts to save him. And yet, even in the face of his anger, all I could think was, how did we get here? How did we fall so far apart? The truth was, I couldn't save him, not unless he was willing to save himself, and I wasn't sure he was. As the days passed, the weight of his words lingered. I couldn't escape them, no matter how hard I tried. He had told me to leave him alone, to stop caring, and I couldn't do it. The guilt twisted inside me, growing heavier with each passing hour. I kept questioning myself. Was I smothering him? Had I been too much, too demanding, too insistent? But how could I not care? How could I walk away when everything I had done for him was meant to give him a chance at a better life? I couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face, the way he had pushed me away, It was as though my love had become a burden, a weight he couldn't bear. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that he was just lashing out because of his guilt, his shame. But deep down I feared that he didn't want to get better, that all my efforts had been in vain, and I was just chasing an illusion. The hardest part was knowing that he could have chosen differently. He could have fought. He could have asked for help. But he hadn't, and it felt like a betrayal. I had done everything I could to help him, but in the end, I wasn't enough. He didn't want to be saved. The next time I saw him, he was different. There was a coldness to him that I couldn't ignore. His eyes had lost the warmth they once held, and there was no trace of the brother I once knew. He wasn't even trying anymore. The shame I had seen before was now replaced with something darker, something that felt like resignation. I could see it in the way he walked, the way he spoke. There was no fight left in him. When I tried to reach out to him, to ask him what had changed, he looked at me with emptiness. He wasn't the person I remembered. The person I had fought so hard to help was gone. In his place stood someone I didn't recognize. It hurt to see him like this, so broken, so lost. But the hardest part was knowing that it wasn't my fault. He had made the choice, and there was nothing more I could do. I had spent years trying to pull him out of the darkness, but this time, I realized I couldn't do it alone. And as much as it broke my heart, I had to accept that he wasn't ready to change. I couldn't understand why it had come to this. All the years, all the effort, it felt like it had been for nothing. I had given everything I had, and yet here we were, stuck in the same cycle, only this time, it was different. This time I knew that I couldn't keep going. I couldn't keep sacrificing my life, my sanity, my peace, for someone who didn't want to change. It was a brutal realization, but it was the truth. I had to start living for myself again. I had to take a step back, even though it felt like I was abandoning him. But I couldn't save him if he wasn't willing to save himself. I had done everything I could, but the road to recovery was his to walk, not mine. I wanted to believe that one day he would choose to fight for himself, but I couldn't keep waiting for that moment. The hardest part was accepting that, sometimes, love wasn't enough. I had to let go. Days passed, and I began rebuilding my life. Then, a call came from the rehab center. My brother had checked in unexpectedly. My emotions were conflicted. Why now? After everything, why wait until I'd given up? Was this real, or another empty promise? The anger flared up, but so did a flicker of hope. Could this be the turning point? Or was it just another lie? I didn't know if I should believe him, but this time, the choice was his. I visited him the next day. When I saw him, he was different, calm, vulnerable. "I'm sorry," he said. His apology was everything I had wanted, but a part of me was unsure. Was this real? Could I trust him? It felt like a dream, but was it too little? Too late? Could I forgive him after everything? I wanted to believe him, but the past haunted me. How many times had I been burned? He was saying the right things, but could I trust him? Still, I couldn't let fear hold me back. Maybe this time was different. Maybe he was ready to fight. I had to allow myself to hope again, even if it was just a flicker. Weeks went by, and I watched him struggle, yet there was progress. It wasn't perfect, but he was fighting in ways I hadn't seen before. The turning point came when I realized I couldn't save him. He had to save himself. I could be there for him, but the fight was his. And that was enough. I never thought this moment would come, but it had. He was sober, truly sober, for the first time in years. The road ahead wasn't easy, but I finally believed in him, and in myself. I had stopped trying to fix him and started just supporting him. This was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. It had been months since that last confrontation, and everything had changed. My brother was sober, really sober. But now, we were facing a new challenge: trust. The tension between us was palpable. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the fear that this was just another phase, another relapse waiting to happen. But I couldn't shake the doubt. I had seen him fall too many times before. Every time he promised to change, every time he swore that things would be different, only to watch it all fall apart. The road to this moment hadn't been easy. There were so many nights when I thought I couldn't go on. The weight of his addiction had drained me, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take. But now, here we were. I had to decide if I could trust him again. Could I let go of the past and allow him to be the person he promised to be? Could I accept that he had changed, that this time he was really ready? The thought made my stomach twist with anxiety. But the truth was, I couldn't keep living in the fear of what could happen. I had to take a leap of faith, and for the first time, I was ready to do it. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked quietly, breaking the silence. I looked at him, caught off guard by the question. It was a question I had avoided for so long. We both had tried to forget the chaos, the pain, the years spent fighting his addiction, but it was impossible to escape it. "All the time," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But I don't want to live there anymore. I don't want to keep looking back. I want to move forward. With you." My heart pounded in my chest as the words left my mouth. I meant them. I knew I had to let go of the past if we were going to have a chance at a future. But the fear of what that meant, what it would cost me, hung heavy in the air. Could I really forgive him? Could I truly move forward, knowing all the hurt he had caused? But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made me believe. He was here now, fully present, trying to make things right. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was scary, but I had to trust him. I had to trust myself. The conversation continued, raw and honest. He spoke of his regrets, of the guilt that weighed on him, the moments he couldn't take back. And I listened. For the first time, I wasn't interrupting, trying to fix things. I was simply listening, because that was all he needed. To be heard. And in that moment, I realized something. All this time, I had been focused on fixing him, on saving him, when all he ever needed was to know that I was there. The truth was, I couldn't fix the past. I couldn't undo the mistakes he had made, and I couldn't carry the weight of his choices. But I could stand beside him as he faced the future, as he fought for his sobriety. I could choose to be there without trying to control or change him. That was the realization that hit me like a wave. It wasn't about fixing him. It was about accepting him, flaws and all. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a simple thank you. Not just for what I had given him throughout his recovery, but for the love, the patience, the unwavering belief I had shown. I had always tried to fix him, but now I realized he had been fixing himself all along. He had taken the hardest step on his own, and I had to respect that. I couldn't carry the burden of his recovery anymore, but I could walk alongside him as he took each step forward. The road wasn't going to be easy. There would still be days when he would doubt himself, days when I would worry about him. But now, there was a shared understanding between us. We didn't have to be perfect. We just had to be real. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. It was in this moment, standing together, that I understood the true meaning of healing. Healing wasn't about perfection or about erasing the past. It was about accepting it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward. My brother wasn't fixed, and neither was I, but together we were finding our way. Slowly, but surely. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. We were learning to forgive, not just each other, but ourselves. We were learning that the path to healing wasn't linear, that it would be messy, and it would be hard. But it was a path worth taking. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, not because everything was perfect, but because we were finally walking it together. The months that followed were quiet, in a way. My brother stayed sober, but life wasn't a fairy tale. There were difficult days, days when the weight of the past crept back in. But now, instead of letting it consume him, he faced it. We faced it. It was a new kind of relationship we had built, one where we weren't pretending that everything was okay all the time. We talked more openly, honestly, and that honesty was healing. For the first time, I realized that recovery wasn't just about him. It was about both of us, about finding a new way to coexist, to rebuild trust, to rebuild ourselves. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if it was enough. But every day he stayed sober was a victory, and every day I chose to love him without trying to fix him was my victory. We were no longer just fighting his addiction, we were fighting together, and that felt like the strongest thing we could do. One evening I watched my brother laugh, really laugh, for the first time in years. It was a sound I had almost forgotten. The joy in his eyes was like a light breaking through a storm. It felt like I was seeing him for the first time, not the addict, not the broken person, but the man I had always known he could be. I realized in that moment that the healing process would never be perfect, but it was real. He was real, and that was enough. I didn't need him to be perfect. I just needed him to keep trying, and he was. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We weren't healed completely, but we were on our way, and for the first time in years, I could finally exhale. There were still days when I worried about him. There were moments when the old fears crept in, when I questioned whether he would slip again. But I had learned something crucial. I couldn't live in constant fear of his relapse. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I had to trust in the progress we'd made. Trust in him. Trust in us. The hardest part of his recovery wasn't the addiction. It was the fear of what could happen next. But I couldn't live in that fear anymore. I had to move forward, just as he had. So I did. Slowly, but surely. Each day was a choice, a small step toward reclaiming my own life, and towards accepting that he was on his own journey. I wasn't in control of it. I couldn't be. But I could love him, support him, and stand beside him as he walked it. The truth was, I would never stop worrying about him. The fear that he could slip, that he could fall back into the darkness would always be there. But I had learned to live with it. I had learned to accept that not everything was in my control. He had his own battles to fight, and all I could do was love him from the sidelines. But that didn't mean I wasn't involved. It didn't mean I wasn't supporting him every step of the way. I couldn't hold his hand through it all anymore, but I could let him know that I was there, no matter what. And that was enough. I had learned the art of detachment, not out of bitterness, but out of love. I had learned that sometimes letting go was the hardest thing to do, but it was also the most loving thing. Looking back, I realized that the person I had become through all of this, the strength I had found, the peace I had achieved, was something I could never have found without going through the storm. My brother and I weren't just surviving anymore. We were building new lives, slowly but surely. We had both changed, and that change was the real victory. The path wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And every day we walked it together was a day worth living. I didn't need him to be perfect. I didn't need him to be who he was before. I just needed him to keep trying. And I would keep trying too. We were healing, one step at a time. It was a crisp morning when I finally realized how far we had come. My brother sitting across from me at the breakfast table was sipping his coffee like it was just another morning. But it wasn't. It hadn't been just another morning for a long time. The silence between us was comfortable now, not filled with the weight of past mistakes or unspoken fears. We had reached a place of understanding, one where neither of us had to prove anything to the other. It wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. I watched him laugh at a joke I'd made, and I realized that this was the life we had been fighting for. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And that was enough. The man sitting across from me wasn't the same one I had once known, the addict, the person who had hurt me and himself. He was someone new, someone who had chosen to fight, chosen to live. And in that moment, I knew I had chosen the right path too. I wasn't living in the past anymore. I was finally letting go of the fear, the guilt, and the anger that had held me captive for so long. We were both healing, one day at a time. I had spent years trying to save him, trying to fix him, but the truth was, he had always been the one saving himself. All I could do was be there for him, to love him as he walked his path. And now, I understood. I wasn't the savior in this story. I was the witness. The person who had watched as he struggled, as he fell, and as he stood back up. There was no grand gesture, no one moment of change. There were just small victories, every day, every decision, every step forward. As we sat there drinking our coffee in peace, I realized that I had been saving myself too. I had spent so much time putting my own needs on hold, trying to fix someone else, that I had neglected myself. But now, I had found my own balance, my own peace. I could love him without losing myself, and that was a lesson I would carry with me forever. The hardest part of healing wasn't just the mistakes or the relapses. It was learning to forgive, not just him but myself. I had to let go of the guilt, the belief that I could have done something differently. I had to stop blaming myself for his choices, stop believing that I could have saved him. I had done my best, and that had to be enough. Forgiving myself wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As I watched my brother take another step forward, a small part of me healed too. It was no longer about fixing him. It was about allowing him to fix himself, and in turn, allowing myself to heal in the process. The truth was, I didn't need to carry his weight anymore. I had my own life to live, my own path to follow, and that was what I was finally choosing to do. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. And slowly, life began to feel normal again. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but real. We weren't who we were before, but we were stronger, more resilient. I had learned to trust again, not just my brother, but myself. And that was the hardest thing of all. The truth was, we had both been through hell, but now we were walking back into the light. Together. It wasn't just about his recovery. It was about the life we were both building, one step at a time. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew we could face it together. As I stood there, watching my brother take another step forward in his journey, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about us. Our journey, our story. We had both changed, grown and healed, not because we were fixed, but because we had learned to accept ourselves and each other. And that was the most powerful thing of all. We weren't the same people who had walked into this journey, but we were stronger, and we were ready for whatever came next. I realized now that the greatest gift I could give him, and myself, was the freedom to let go, to live without the weight of the past, and to embrace the future together without fear. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Not just for him, but for us.